The door was shut, but someone inside was breathing. It wasn't the door to the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. It was the door to a truth long sealed by the system. For years, the regime had bolted it shut. But today someone had felt that locked door tremble, and that someone wasn't an ordinary citizen. It was President Ibrahim. He had woken up early, as always. The tea was placed on the table, the morning paper in hand. The usual files lay before him: military reports, policy briefs, parliamentary memos. Yet today his hand froze mid-motion. He closed the file, placed the tea aside without taking a sip, and stood up from his desk. His staff assumed a new meeting had been scheduled, but the secretary noticed something different. That typical political smile, always a fixture on the president's face, was gone, replaced by a quiet unrest, as if his heart wished to speak, but his tongue bore a weight. "Call the driver," the president said. "Yes, sir," the secretary replied, lifting the phone with urgency. "Where to, sir?" "To the women's prison," said No. The room felt as if air had vanished. "Serve the women's prison. Should we inform?" "Do not inform anyone," the president said sternly. "If a word gets out, the truth will be erased. I want to see what's hidden." When the driver arrived, he noticed the president hadn't worn his official uniform or any protocol badges. Just a plain khaki shirt, black shoes. No briefcase, no files. He got into a modest car and gave orders. One backup vehicle, no sirens, no media team, only silence. A silence that had become his identity, the man behind the presidential title. As the car moved through the streets of Ouagadougou, life appeared normal: children heading to school, women fetching water, shopkeepers arranging goods. A typical morning. But the man riding past them was anything but typical. He was a man stepping outside the boundaries of routine, a man walking into the truth. From the car window, President watched the city pass, but his mind drifted elsewhere. How many times had he read about prisons, sat through presentations, seen reports, but never stepped foot inside one himself? Why, he asked himself. Am I too part of this system that documents pain in files, but fails to recognize it in faces? The driver remained silent, but kept glancing at the president through the rearview mirror. This wasn't the face of the leader who addressed the nation. This was the face of a man wounded from within. As they passed through the old quarters of the city, caught sight of an ancient mosque. Across the street, a young girl sprinted past with a book in her hand. He watched her for a moment and softly murmured, "Time never stops for anyone. Prison walls, they halt the breath of life. Today, I go to feel that breath, the one that's been suffocating for years." By the time the car reached the outer gate of the prison, the sun was scorching. Chains clung to rusted iron doors like soil covering a grave. 2 guards stood at the gate. First they recognized the car, then they recognized him. Their eyes widened in disbelief, rolled down the window. "Don't be alarmed. Just open the gate," he said gently. One guard panicked and rushed inside. The other stood frozen for a moment, then unlocked the chains. The gate creaked open like wind shifting after years of stillness. The president stepped inside and inhaled deeply. The air was damp, the walls covered in moss, and behind the shadows eyes hiding pain. This wasn't the reality shown in reports. This was the kingdom the nation forgot, a place some saw only as punishment but never as a mirror. His footsteps echoed through the compound. Prison staff stood aside in disbelief. The warden came running, drenched in sweat. "Sir, if only we had known, we would have raised a hand," cutting him off. "If you had known, you would have shown me what you always show. But I came to see what you hide." And so, the quiet morning turned into a question that was about to reach the breath of the imprisoned. When the vehicle stopped outside the gate of the women's wing, time seemed to hold its breath. The morning heat pressed down, yet in the shadow of this gate a different kind of coldness lingered. President Ibrahim opened the door himself. Guards flanked him, stepped out calmly. His face held neither anger nor surprise, just a silent resolve. The central gate of the prison was made of thick, rusted iron sheets. Stains from years of anguish etched into their surface like forgotten graffiti. 2 guards flanking the door stood stunned. One instinctively reached for his rifle, thinking a threat had arrived. The other quickly recognized the truth. This was no ordinary visitor. This was the guardian of the Republic himself. "Sir," the guard stammered. "Don't be afraid," Open the Gate said. "And remember, no one was informed." That's the point. For a moment, silence reigned. Then came the warden, disheveled, uniforms skewed, sweat trickling down his face. His eyes held fear, confusion, and guilt all at once. "Sir, if we'd been informed, we would have prepared." "I don't need your preparation," the president said, looking him in the eyes. "I came to see what you conceal, the pain that doesn't fit in files, the women whose stories live only in their eyes." The gate groaned as it opened. A gust of stale air hit the president's face. The air in which justice had suffocated. Rotten walls, water dripping from ceilings, filthy stains on the floor. Every detail screamed. Time had stopped here. The president moved slowly into the inner courtyard. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that hides years of screaming. Behind each cell, eyes began to peer through iron bars. Some quickly looked away. Some let silent tears fall. And in a few, a flicker of unknown hope began to shine. Could it really be? Could someone have come not just to listen, but to see? The warden tried speaking again. "Sir, this cell, this inmate is mentally unstable. That wing houses serious offenders." But sighs stopped him. Silence. "Today, I'll hear the truth not from your words, but from their eyes." He stopped at one cell, placed his hand on the door, paused, then slowly pushed it open. Inside sat a few women, silent, heads lowered. Their ages ranged from 20 to 50, clothes torn, scars on skin, weariness on faces. One woman dared to look up, saw him, hesitated. "Are you really the president?" she asked, barely audible. He nodded. "I came to see you. I came to hear you." Tears streamed down her face. Then someone began to sob. And within moments, the entire room echoed with the sound of weeping. These tears weren't for political promises. They were for the truth, for someone had finally opened a door not locked by iron alone, but by blindness, denial, and neglect. The warden rushed forward, flustered. "Sir, they're just being emotional." "I can arrange some tea if you'd like." "There's no time for tea," the president said without looking at him. "There is time only for the truth." With each step deeper into the prison, one question kept echoing in his heart. Have I spent all these years knowing my nation through files alone? What about the truth locked away in here? As he entered the inner compound, his gaze stopped at a small, unremarkable cell. A worn curtain covered the entrance. Behind it, a woman sat silently. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Because that simple cell didn't just contain a prisoner. It held the moment that turned a president into a human being. Part 2, 10 to 20, the cell that stopped the president. It was not unlike the others. It's something about it made President Ibrahim stop in his tracks. Perhaps it was the torn, faded curtain hanging limply over the door. Or maybe it was the silence leaking from inside, louder than the cries echoing through the rest of the prison. He stepped forward slowly. Behind him, the warden followed, as if a secret was about to be uncovered, a secret whose only punishment would be hearing the truth. The door creaked open. Sunlight streamed inside, casting a golden glow over the dust on the cell walls. In one corner sat a woman, her head bowed, a dull scarf draped over her, hands resting tightly on her knees, as if trying to hold herself together, afraid she might shatter. Watched her in silence. Then softly he asked, "Your name?" After several seconds of silence, like a spring bubbling from deep within a frozen mountain, faint voice emerged. "Mariam." The president pulled a chair closer. The screech of its wooden legs echoed like even the furniture had been waiting years for this moment. "How long have you been here, Mariam?" Without lifting her gaze, she replied, 6 years, 2 months, 4 days. The precision hit like a hammer to the chest. Only someone who counted every day as a wound would remember it so clearly. "Your crime." "I was a domestic worker. My employer accused me of stealing her jewelry. No witnesses, no lawyer." "The next day I was taken to court. Verdict delivered on the spot." These weren't words, they were slaps to the face of the system. Something flickered in his eyes, a quiet fire reigniting inside him. He knew people like him heard such stories often. But this time, for the first time, he was hearing it from the eyes of someone whose life had been destroyed. The warden quickly handed him a file. Sir, this is her case file. Old but complete. The pages were worn, their corners yellowed. Opened it. The first page screamed, "Charge, theft of jewelry. Complainant, Shasta Lauren." Judge Samuel Bad. Samuel Bad. The same judge who had faced serious bribery allegations 3 years ago. The same judge whose case was dropped due to lack of evidence. The president's fingers stiffened around the file. "Witnesses?" he asked. "None," the warden replied helplessly. "Only the complainant's statement." "No lawyer. It was a free legal proceeding. The verdict was issued within 24 hours. Shut the file and looked at Mariam. She hadn't moved, her emotions seemed buried with her voice. "Did you ever appeal to whom?" she said, finally looking at him. "Court doors open only for those who have lawyers, time, or connections. I only had the name of God." That sentence, it felt as though it had been etched across every wall of the prison. The president lowered his head. He was a politician, yes, but a human first. He knew the law was filled with chapters, but what he had seen in this cell was in no book. "Mariam," his voice now carried not authority but sorrow, "if you were freed today, what would you do?" She looked up for the first time, no shock in her eyes, no hope either, just exhaustion. 6 years of it, marinating in those prison walls. "I would visit my mother's grave first, and maybe try to forgive myself for staying silent." The president stood. His back was straight, but his heart heavy. This wasn't just a woman's story. It was the tombstone of a nation's broken justice system. And Marma, daughter, buried alive for 6 years, was its witness. That evening, as dusk slowly folded over Ouagadougou, the questions rising inside President refused to fade with the sun. Upon returning to the palace, he summoned his inner circle. On his desk lay Mariam's weathered case file. He had brought it himself as if carrying a testimony that would now be presented before history. He reopened the file, but this time, he didn't read the words. He read the motives hidden behind them. Shasta Lauren, woman from a powerful business family. Her husband, a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Commerce. Judge Samuel Bad, the same disgraced judge once suspended on bribery charges, but later cleared due to insufficient evidence. This wasn't Mariam's case anymore. This was a stain on the justice system. With a tone of steel, spoke, "I want the complete audio recording of that day's court session. I want Judge Samuel Bad's history, and I want the full profile of Shasta Lauren's family."
"Oh, tonight?"
His advisors froze. They had never heard such urgency. But one look at the fire, in Sizan no one dared question him. Within hours, the files and recordings were placed before him. The tape rolled. The judge's voice played. "The accused denies the charge. Complainant's statement is sufficient. Court declares a guilty verdict with hard labor." That was it. No cross-examination, no defense, no questions. As if someone had torn a page out of the law book and written a death sentence on it. Closed his eyes. A wounded memory settled behind his eyelids. Then slowly he spoke. This was not justice. This was an execution of dignity. He called his press secretary. "Tomorrow morning I will hold a press conference myself, and tomorrow Judge Samuel Bad's inquiry will be reopened." The secretary hesitated. "Sir, this could raise questions about judicial independence." Looked at him coldly. "If a woman was jailed for 6 years without witnesses or a lawyer, that's not judicial independence. That's a marketplace of punishment, and where justice is soul-raising, questions becomes a duty." Just then, a message arrived on his phone. Shasta Lauren's husband had requested a meeting with the president. Place the phone down. A sharp smile touched his lips. "They want to meet now?" "No." "That Mariam's voice is out in the open?" "No. That door is now closed. It was open for years for the oppressors. To no more." That same night, he issued a confidential executive order. Begin the immediate release process for Mariam bint Yaqub. Her conviction is to be declared void due to wrongful legal procedure. Shockwaves rippled through the Ministry of Justice, police headquarters, and the Human Rights Commission. Files were pulled. Phones rang. The past so comfortably buried was now being exhumed, but needed no apologies, no justifications, no political favors. Because in front of him sat the woman who had not spoken, not cried, not screamed for 6 years, but whose silence had shaken an entire nation. Dawn was still stretching its golden arms over Ouagadougou. But within the women's prison, an anxious energy buzzed. Guards straightened their uniforms. The superintendent disappeared behind piles of files. Senior officers stood at the gate in rigid lines. No one had ever seen anything like it. Then came the black car with tinted windows. It stopped at the gate. The door opened, and out stepped President Ibrahim alone. No security, no media, no fanfare. Just one man, one mission. He walked inside with quiet resolve. "Open cell B7, he commanded. Guards rushed, fumbling for keys. Trembling hands unlocked rusted locks. Each metallic click sounded like the breaking of chains that had held truth captive for years. Mariam still sat on her mat, aware of the noise, but instinctively withdrawn. When the final chain exhaled its last breath, freedom had arrived. The iron door creaked open slowly. So slowly it felt like the entire world had paused. President Ibrahim stepped inside. The imprisoned women fell silent, watching him. One woman let out a quiet sob. Another raised her hands in prayer, and a third closed her eyes, letting tears roll down her cheeks. He walked straight to stand in front of Mariam Bint Yaqub. His eyes were moist, but his voice was steady and firm. "Mariam, the charges against you have been proven false. You are now free. The government has issued your official release." Mariam looked up as if she were waking from a long, heavy sleep. Her lips trembled, but her voice did not rise. She just stared, believing. "Can I really go outside?" she whispered. Ibrahim nodded gently. "Yes, and today, you are not just being freed from chains, you are being freed from a blind system." The guards handed her new clothes, a plain white suit and a clean shawl. She draped the cloth over herself. Whispers spread among the inmates. "That's Mariam." But Mariam said nothing. She simply rose and started walking slowly beside the president, as if each step left behind a wound from the last 6 years. At the cell door, President paused for a moment, casting one last glance at the place. The damp walls, the torn mat on the floor, and the door that at last stood open. "Not all doors are made of iron," he murmured. "Some are within our conscience, and today, one such door has opened." As they stepped outside, camera flashes erupted. Reporters shouted questions. "Do you want to say something? How do you survive 6 years? Will you sue the court system?" Mariam heard it all, but answered none. She only lifted her eyes to the sky. The sun touched her face, its warmth the first she had felt in 6 years. As she approached the car, one reporter shouted, "What's in your heart now, Mariam?" She stopped. For the first time, she looked toward the people. Her face was calm, serene. "There is nothing in my heart," she said softly. "But there is an empty space in my chest, a silence the courts left there over 6 years. Now it's time to fill it." The door shut. The car drove away. Inside the prison, every woman silently whispered the same prayer. "O Lord, never make anyone a Mariam. But if you must, then grant her justice like Ibrahim's." In the outskirts of Ouagadougou stood a guest house, once reserved only for heads of state. Today, it had been reopened for a silent woman. On the orders of President Ibrahim, every room, every bed, and every table had been prepared with meticulous care. For the most important guest of the day, a woman whose hands had been shackled for 6 years. When the car arrived, the staff stood in line to welcome her. But Mariam, who for years had known only the clink of chains and the rustle of straw mats, could not easily accept this calm new world. Her steps were hesitant as she entered the lounge. Every step felt like she was crossing into a different life. A female attendant welcomed her with kindness. "Hey, this room is yours, Mariam Bibi." She opened the door. Inside was soft carpet, a subtle fragrance, white curtains, a gentle bed, and a small mirror hung on the wall. The room was quiet, but not with the silence of prison. It was a silence full of dignity. "You may bathe now. Warm water is ready. If you need help, I'll be right outside," the attendant said, gently closing the door behind her. Mariam slowly removed the worn shawl that had stayed with her throughout her imprisonment. As she stepped into the bathroom, her heart pounded. Barefoot on the tiles, it felt like the floor itself had softened. She opened the tap. Water flowed directly onto her palm. She flinched not in fear, but in awe. As the water ran down her body, it felt like 6 years of prison were washing away. With each drop, a stain disappeared, the sting of a slap, the insult of a curse, the ache of an ignored question. She stood under the water for a long time, as if meeting her own self for the very first time. When she came out, a soft, fragrant white suit lay on the bed. She dressed slowly, draped the clean shawl over herself, and stepped in front of the mirror. "Is this me?" she whispered. The reflection showed a clean face, slightly swollen eyes, a tired but glowing look. Her hair now free of the scent of prison. She studied the image deeply, like seeing herself for the very first time. Some moments are beyond words, like the one when a person regains their identity. A light knock came at the door. "Mariam Bibi, dinner is ready. If you wish, please join us." She adjusted her shawl and walked slowly toward the dining room. A white cloth covered the table. On it were plates of hot curry, rice, bread, kheer, and tea. She pulled out a chair, paused a moment, then sat. She looked around. No guards, no one to give orders, no one demanding anything. "All this for me?" she asked quietly. A servant replied respectfully, "Yes, you are our president's guest." She took the first bite, warm, soft, full of flavor. A moment that might be ordinary for most people, but for her, it was the rebirth of life. As the food slid down her throat, tears welled in her eyes. 6 years. This is the first time I've eaten without fear, she murmured to herself. That night, Mariam opened the window and looked at the moon, the same moon that once seemed so distant through the prison bars. Now, it felt close. Its light spilled into her room and into her soul. For the first time in 6 years, she slept not under someone else's cloth, not behind a locked door, but by her own choice. The guest house glowed golden in the evening light. Outside, the sun was setting, but inside, a new dawn was rising. Mariam sat silently on her bed, a white shawl over her shoulders, a cup of tea in her hands. Her eyes fixed outside, a view with no bars, no walls. Just then, a knock on the door. It wasn't the attendant, it was President Ibrahim himself. "May I come in?" he asked softly. Mariam stood up quickly, adjusting her shawl in nervous respect. Yes, of course. He stepped inside, pulled a chair, and sat silently. For a while, only the gentle clink of teacups filled the room. Then Ibrahim broke the silence. "Mariam, before your imprisonment, what did you want to become?" The question caught her off guard. She looked at him, surprised, then lowered her gaze. After a long silence, her voice emerged. "I wanted to become a nurse," she whispered. "A nurse," he repeated. "Yes, my mother was often sick. She would wait in long lines for medicine. Private hospitals were too expensive for us. I used to dream if only I were a doctor or a nurse, maybe no mother would die without medicine." She stopped, her eyes wet. "How far did you study?" he asked. "Till matriculation. After that, life didn't allow. My father died. My mother had a stroke. I started working. And then," she left the sentence unfinished, as if the word prison was too heavy to speak again. Ibrahim sipped his tea, took a deep breath, and said, "You will become a nurse, Mariam. The dream that was stolen from you, we will place it back in your hands. The government will take full responsibility for your education. You will study, you will grow. And one day, someone's mother will be healed by your hands."
8.
Mariam heard. Himbut couldn't believe it. Her eyes were filled with wonder. Her lips trembled. "People like me, can we really start over?" she asked softly. The president leaned forward, his voice steady. "The real question is, why didn't a system like ours let you start again?" Mariam's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were not of sorrow. They were of hope. He rose, gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tonight sleep knowing that tomorrow you will wake not as a prisoner, but as a student. Stand. When you hold a pen tomorrow, believe. This world will have no choice but to listen to your pain." The president walked out in silence, but Mariam sat still as stone. It felt like someone had awakened a voice buried deep inside her. The night grew darker. She walked to the window and looked up at the moon. The sky was clear, and the moon was in full bloom. She gently opened the window and let the moonlight fall on her face. and then she whispered to herself, "If the moon can shine again, maybe I can too." The room remained quiet, but inside her, a storm had erupted, a storm of dreams, courage, and a belief that the morning would mark the beginning of a new life. As a new day dawned in Ouagadougou, a silent revolution had already taken birth. Mariam was no longer a prisoner. On president orders, she was enrolled in one of the country's leading nursing institutes, but she wasn't like other students. She arrived each day in a plain white dress, carrying a small bag. There was humility in her face, but a light in her eyes that cut through years of darkness. At first, other students fell silent in her presence. One whispered, "Isn't she the one from prison?" Another mocked, "She'll study with us." But time, as President once said, proves something. Those who've endured pain are the best at listening. Mariam never answered their taunts, never complained. She just listened, studied, absorbed every lesson like her life depended on it. One day, during a lecture on human empathy, the teacher posed a question. "If a patient cannot speak, how would you know what they need?" The class fell silent. Mariam raised her hand and said softly, "We must try to read their silence with our hearts, because sometimes silence is deeper than a scream." The room went still. The teacher paused, then said, "Today I feel like I came to learn." Around this time, President ordered a secret audit of the nation's prisons. And then came a decision that stunned the country. Mariam was appointed legal advisor for women's prisons. The nation was shaken. A former inmate now, a legal officer? The media erupted. The opposition cried foul, but responded with just one line. "Only the one who has suffered injustice can truly understand justice." Mariam soon walked again through the very gate she once exited in silence, this time as an officer. The old warden lowered his eyes. Guards saluted her. And among the inmates, there was a scent of hope. She roamed the barracks, listened to cases, and gave every woman a chance to speak. Some cried. Some folded their hands in silent pleas. One day a young woman falsely accused of theft sobbed, "We never believed someone like you would come listen to us. Courts, they're for the rich." Mariam took her hand and said gently, "When I was imprisoned, no one heard my voice. But now I promise, I will turn your silence into sound." That day the prison echoed not with wails, but with calm like someone had laid a balm over old wounds. That evening, at a private event, President said, "Mariam is no longer just a person. She is a movement. She is proving that when a woman speaks, the system must listen." Inside the same prison where cries once echoed, a wooden plaque was hung with golden letters, "Mariam Center for Legal Awareness and Guidance." The same cell blocks, the same walls. But the air had changed. The center was modest, but dignified rows of chairs, shelves of files, and a whiteboard with a single sentence written across it. "Only the one who has suffered injustice can truly understand the law." This wasn't just a place to teach, it was a place to awaken. Mariam filled it not with books, but with lived experience. She called in different inmates every day. Some spoke for the first time. Some trembled. Some just listened silently. But all bore the same question on their faces. Is someone finally here to listen to us? Mariam explained each woman's case, drew diagrams to map legal proceedings, broke down complex statutes with examples, and ended each session saying, "The day you tell your story yourself, the world won't stay silent." One day, a middle-aged inmate quietly asked, "Are you really the same Mariam who was imprisoned here for 6 years?" Mariam smiled, "Yes, but I'm not just your pastime, your future." Gradually, lawyers began visiting. The government signed an agreement with a legal aid organization. Weekly sessions were held. Women were taught their rights, how to appeal, how to understand their cases. For the first time, real appeals were filed. Some even got bail. The prison staff noticed the shift. Time wasn't just passing. Awareness was rising. Then one day, the newly appointed superintendent arrived to inspect the center. After a thorough look, she said, "This isn't training. This is a revolution. You've made prisoners human again." Mariam lowered her eyes and replied, "I did nothing. I just gave voice to the screams buried in the walls." Soon, the media took notice. Headlines across newspapers hailed the Mariam Center as a university of law inside prison. TV programs celebrated her story, but Mariam remained silent. For her, this wasn't about Famit, it was about light. The light she had found in 6 years of darkness. At a small gathering of women soon to be released, one stepped forward. Whatever we are today, it's because of you. You taught us we are not just prisoners. We are voices. Mariam touched her forehead and said, "Now, go and become Mariam, because behind every closed door lies a story waiting for someone to listen." Paris, United Nations Women's Rights Conference. Thousands sat in silent anticipation. Behind a plain white curtain stood the most unconventional speaker of the event. "Please welcome," the host announced, "Mariam bint Yaqub, a prisoner, now the conscience of the world." Applause erupted. Some in the crowd looked at each other in disbelief. A prisoner? A speaker? Then she appeared dressed simply, walking with the dignity only pain can teach. She took the mic, paused, and in a voice clear, steady, and deeply human, began. "I was imprisoned for 6 years. No chains on my feet, but my voice was caged. In that silence, I learned something, ... The loudest scream, the one buried in the heart." The room froze. A journalist wrote it down. An African delegate bowed her head. A French scholar whispered, "This is history being written before us." Ayem continued, "I had no lawyer, no hearing. But I did not break. Because one day a president came to my door and said, 'You may speak now.'" She scanned the hall. "Today I come to open that door for you, your daughters, and for all whose cries remain buried beneath pages of law." Thunderous applause again. But Mariam raised her hand. Silence returned. Justice is not just a verdict. Justice begins the moment we listen to a woman's silence and believe it. Then came the sentence that echoed across the globe. The world doesn't need new laws. It needs new ears that can listen, believe, and change. The next day, this quote was printed on the United Nations Central Board. Every news channel ran it as their headline. A new ear for justice. Mariam's final sentence echoes across the globe. As she stepped off the stage, a little French girl ran to her. "Can I be Mariam too?" Mariam hugged her and said, "You don't need to be me. Just never stay silent." The entire hall rose in a standing ovation. But it wasn't for the speech. It was for the woman who turned silence into speech, prison into light, and justice into a living, breathing force. Mariam is no longer just a name. She is the sentence written across every locked door. Justice lives when silence is heard.